going to talk today about really the economic underpinnings or the business case for trails, if you will, in terms of the importance of trails and public lands to the economic fabric of the country. And that's something that I think has been getting more attention recently because of course, the economic straits our country is in, but also the importance of our public lands, as we saw in the recent government shutdown, the outcry of not being able to get access to national parks and other areas. I want to share a quote with you from Will Rogers, which I think is really important, and I think is sort of the driving undercurrent of what we want to talk about today. And that's, of course, this is an American icon and a very famous American. "Show me a healthy community with a healthy economy, and I will show you a community that has a green infrastructure in order and understands the relationship between the built and the unbuilt environment." I just want to think about that because what we're going to underscore today is the importance of trails and parks to the economy of America, and that green infrastructure, trails and parks, are truly economic engines for us. And we're going to talk about some examples that I'm going to start with some perspective from the outdoor recreation economy. Then Laura will be addressing and sort of zero in on a regional economic driver, and that's the Appalachian Trail itself. And then Kristen will focus and kind of take us then back up and actually look at nationally and even internationally the impact of our trails and parks on the larger tourism economy. So with that, let me just underscore just quickly, just to kind of frame some things. There's a lot of recent work that's come out now that really underscores the importance of trails and our public lands to be a combination of creators of business. Businesses themselves use trails, and again, I'll circle back on this in a moment, use trails to decide the location and availability of trails and public lands and parks to determine where they will place their businesses. We'll talk a bit about the job generation, community improvement and redevelopment that happens. Kristen and well, all three of us will talk a bit about trail tourism, which is one of the greatest economic drivers in this country, which create, of course, a tremendous array of opportunities to vacation, both for Americans as well as a significant number of international tourists. Another important element that I think is really quite striking is that today, and actually over the last 10 years, the National Association of Home Builders has done a series of surveys, and their last one they did in 2008, though this statement still holds, is that trails consistently remain the #1 amenity sought by prospective home buyers. Just think about that for a minute. Because as part of this survey, they also found that trail availability trumped 16 other categories, including personal security, access to shopping, and a host of other amenities, if you will. So trails really, when people go out and want to spend arguably their single biggest expenditure, which would be the purchase of a home, trails consistently and the availability of trails in their community or close by continues to be the #1 amenity. And that's really pretty striking. And given the importance of home building and home buying to the economy of the United States, just want to underscore that. And then a final one, and we're not going to talk specifically about the health benefits of trails and outdoor exercise, but I think we're all aware, because there's just such a growing body of work and information related to the importance of getting out on trails and recreating. And I just use a couple of quick examples. A study in Lincoln, Nebraska, for example, they saw that in Lincoln, their cost for trails was about $209 per citizen. But in their study, they found that, in fact, the return by getting people out on those trails and by maintaining those trails in a mid-sized city like Lincoln was almost 3 times the benefit. They saw a $564 per person benefit, and we can certainly get you these sightings. And in Miami, just another example, they looked at their Ludlam Trail there, which is a multi-use trail, and they've been able to quantify that in that particular area for Miami, which is a very large and quite, of course, diverse community in America, that trail alone saves them $1.7 to $2.3 million a year in direct medical costs. And that's really pretty striking. And what I want to underscore is there are strong economic underpinnings to these statements. It's not just a feel-good kind of statement saying, well, trails are good, we should have them, we should have public lands, open space. The fact is, this all makes great economic sense for us. I just want to quickly point out that when we talk about trails and public lands, we look at a pretty diverse buffet of options, if you will, from wilderness, very much backcountry up at the top with the deer, down to state forests, over to private land. We have a full array of options in terms of trails for Americans of all walks of life. So just keep that in mind as we proceed. Now, we're circulating, and we have available, and certainly everyone can take a copy of this. This is a study that came out by the Outdoor Industry Association, of which American Hiking Society is a member. I'm going to be quoting some of the statistics from this to just give you an idea, I think a pretty powerful idea, of just how big and important the outdoor recreation economy is to America. So, and some of you probably heard these numbers before, but this comes from 2012 numbers. The outdoor recreation economy generates over 6 million jobs in America. We see annually spending of over $646 billion. And everything I'm going to show you is in this, so you can find the charts. And we see about $40 billion both in federal tax and then state tax, $40 billion each per year, pretty significant. But what I want to do is underscore how outdoor recreation, getting out on trails, both land and water trails, very important to realize. We're talking about paddling as well, any kind of trail. Outdoor recreation generates more than twice the number of jobs in America that oil and gas industry does. More than the pharmaceutical industry, education, and actually transportation and warehousing. You can see those as well. That's a very striking, and then we're going to look, and Kristen will help frame this even a little more broadly, because this is a particularly large subset of the tourism economy in America. The what, 1.6 trillion, I think, something like that?
Yeah.
So pretty significant, but this is a real job generator. A job generator across all 50 states, getting out on trails, being involved in outdoor recreation. And then just comparing what consumers spend, you can see that pretty striking that, again, consumers spend more on outdoor recreation, the $646 billion, than they do on pharmaceuticals, even though we're a heavily drugged country. The fact that we spend more on outdoor recreation than gasoline and fuels, and you can see the other. This is a significant piece of the American economy. And trails are really a key piece in this. Now, when we look at the economy, and then when we look at Laura and Kristen's examples, one of the things I want to underscore is this $646 billion a year economy generates even more, and I'm going to show you that in a sec, but it is only possible because of the agencies at the federal, state, and local level, and the myriad number of partners that work together with agencies to protect trails, to protect public lands, parks of all kinds. If we did not have that partnership infrastructure in place, we would not be able to protect the lands and waters, trails, and that infrastructure. And that's really important, because what we want to underscore is that it's essential that Congress continue to make those appropriations adequate and sufficient appropriations for public lands, for trails, so that we can continue to see this economic driver succeed in the country. And then one of the things just to underscore is that both community trails and backcountry trail projects are without a doubt some of the most valuable investments that the federal government can make, as well as state and local governments, and truly are national assets. And finally, just want to underscore that this is one of the highest returns on investment we believe the American taxpayer actually has, because not only does it serve all Americans, and it's very equal in its service, because these are, for the most part, areas that are open to all, but also to our tremendously large visitor array. Now, that $646 billion, you have a much more detailed chart in that book, the booklet there. But I just want to underscore the $646 billion at the bottom, and you can see those other numbers that I had at the bottom. I just want to show you how it's broken down with other trail sports is hiking, backpacking, trail running, and climbing. So you can see just those alone, specifically broken out, is almost $81 billion a year, and 768,000 jobs generated. And you can see cycling has a very strong, and then camping of all kinds, including recreation vehicles. So you just pulling out those three areas, which have a strong connection to trails in America, you see a significant economic connection between the users and obviously the amount of funding that's generated. Now what I want to do, keep that $646 billion a year in mind. Now what I want to just do is show you what the calculated ripple or multiplier effect is from that $646 billion. And what has been estimated in this study is that the ripple effect from direct outdoor recreation spending of $646 billion has a ripple effect of upwards of $1.6 trillion a year. And that's the tremendous impact that it has out into the community, the multiplier ripple effect you see. And then you can see, I won't go through all these numbers, but you can see that each trail sports, cycling and camping in this case, grow. What is so striking is that 6.1 million jobs are supported directly in outdoor recreation, and trails are the principal conduit for people to recreate, whether they're land or water trails. But look at the number of jobs in the ripple effect. You've got a $1.6 trillion a year ripple effect total, and 12 million, estimated 12 million jobs, American jobs, generated as a result of that. And that's really pretty exciting. And first time I really saw this deep analysis, it's pretty striking and very important. So what I want to do, and I'm going to finish and then we're going to turn it over to Laura, is just underscore that trails and outdoor recreation, getting out on public lands and parks, is not just a leisure activity. It's not something that we can say, well, this is great, but it's on the fringe. It is actually a fundamental element of the American economy, and I would even say that it's a basic human need to be able to get out, get outdoors, connect with nature, and then have a good lifetime of fitness. So with that, I'm going to shift over and we're going to take a look at the Appalachian Trail. So just give me a sec. And then we'll take questions, after.
Great. Thanks, Greg. I appreciate it. As Greg mentioned, my role here is to talk specifically about the economic impact of one trail, the Appalachian Trail, or as many know, the AT. And I want to start off by just providing some context and information about the Appalachian Trail for those of you that may not be familiar with this National Scenic Trail. I am the Director of Conservation for the Appalachian Trail Conservancy. We are the nonprofit, volunteer-based organization that works closely with the National Park Service and the U.S. Forest Service and many state agencies to manage and protect the trail. Primarily, we support a base of about 6,000 volunteers that contribute over 250,000 hours towards management of this really significant national trail on the East Coast. A little bit of history. In 1921, forester and planner Benton Mackay envisioned sustainable communities along the Appalachian Highlands connected by a trail, and that this trail would essentially offer significant recreation opportunities for urbanites in places like Washington, D.C. and New York City. And the AT was then established by a corps of dedicated volunteers, and in 1968 was designated one of the first national scenic trails under the National Trails Act. And now it is administered by the Department of the Interior and is a unit of the National Park System. I think many of you know that the AT spans from Georgia to Maine. It's 2,181 miles. It's a footpath that travels through wild places, through rural America, and through communities on the edge of one of the most populated areas in the United States. It is this close proximity to millions and hundreds of accessible trailheads that invite more than 2 million visitors to the trail each year. And today, the AT is a global model for long-distance trails. We attract visitors from around the U.S. and the world. The AT is one of the longest permanently marked trails traversing through Appalachian forests and along Appalachian ridgelines. with this snow coming, I know you all are dreaming about a hike on the AT this summer. Offering a premier experience from remote wilderness areas to more accessible trail segments near major metropolitan areas such as New York City and Washington, D.C. And of course, the AT also captures the imagination and determination of those that aspire to hike the entire length. And there are a wide variety of users on the AT, all looking for their version of a personal adventure. And while the main attraction of the AT is the amazing scenery, the towns, the gateway communities are also an important part of the recreational experience. Communities offer services to hikers out for a day or a longer trek. Many communities embrace the trail with their own signage or specialized services. And for example, near Pauling, New York, there's even a train stop for folks that want to come up from New York City in a more urban environment. More and more communities are offering services off trails for those folks that enjoy staying in a more comfortable accommodation in the evening. And I think more and more we're seeing, especially among the baby boomer generation, that the opportunity to enjoy the scenery during the day and be more comfortable in the evening is very attractive. So in 2010, the U.S. Forest Service conducted a visitor use study. And this study actually has been published, and that's how we arrived at the number of 2 million annual visitors to the AT. It's not an easy number to come by because there are so many access points to get on the AT. As part of that study, the researchers looked at some of the spending and arrived at the fact that we're looking at about 125 to 168 million in annual spending along the trail. More locally, that spending is looking like about $27 million, and that there are $36 million in local economic spin-offs. And this is the sort of information that more and more we are hearing from our gateway communities that they want to know about. And it's my impression that this research is just scratching the surface, that we have the opportunity to do more in-depth studies to understand the economic impact even more so at the local level. And I think one of the things about the AT is that it certainly plays into the themes for successful tourism. There was a 2013 report called The Paradigm Shift in Travel and Tourism, Win or Die. And in that report, they highlighted some of the important aspects of tourism today based on research from the last 3 decades. And essentially people are looking for an authentic experience. They want to come to a place and appreciate the natural and cultural resources, to get a sense of someplace different, not downtown, anywhere USA. Some of these places are more accessible because they're branded and they're well known. And that they have strong content, and certainly that they appeal to Generation X. And I would suggest that a trail like the AT, and in fact many of the trails in the United States, have these qualities and their own stories to tell. And so shortly after 2010, my organization acknowledged the interests of communities and the trend in sustainable tourism. And we recognize the opportunity and need to engage gateway communities in order to better protect the trail and foster a legacy of public stewardship in return for branded connection to the trail, and something that could help market local services to future hikers. And so we develop a branded program that we call the Appalachian Trail Community Program. It's trademarked, and we use this logo to help promote awareness about gateway communities. And today we have 35 communities that have essentially self-selected to enter into this program, primarily because they recognize the opportunity to be part of a branded network of communities up and down the trail, and that connection helps to foster partnerships that will assist with things like marketing. So through our community program, we are able to share information through our media outlets, including our Facebook pages, our e-newsletters, our collaboration with other local tourism or national tourism sorts of organizations that in many ways put rural communities that otherwise would be completely off the map on the map. And it's, in my mind, just the beginning of future that can, again, help us protect the trail, to engage more people in trail management, and acknowledge that the landscapes around these rural communities do have significant services to offer to people primarily looking for an adventure. Again, either a small adventure or a large adventure. And this is just an example of an iPhone app that communities in Virginia developed, starting to recognize that, oh, in fact, we do have an audience that we can market to, and otherwise would not have. The other opportunity that the trail offers, and I think Greg referenced this in terms of work with American Hiking Society and the Appalachian Trail Conservancy, we offer opportunities for voluntourism. So we're attracting people to the trail, not just for a recreational experience, but for a service experience and an opportunity to give back and to learn more about the communities that they may be traversing through. And then lastly, I just want to highlight some of the regional initiatives that are emerging in part out of the designations that the Appalachian Trail Conservancy has been working on with our communities and building our community partnerships. This particular regional partnership is in Southwest Virginia. It's supported by Senator Warner and other political leaders in the area, recognizing that there are many natural and cultural assets that can be promoted for outdoor recreation. The AT is one of those significant assets, and the collaboration with other partners in the region really helps us to promote awareness about outdoor recreation as a potential economic driver. Those of you that are familiar with Southwest Virginia may know that large industry is not necessarily going to be attracted to this area. So in terms of rural development and the sustainability of the rural communities, accessing and using the natural assets in a way that is sustainable into the future is a great opportunity for those communities.
Okay, we're going to shift over to our colleague Kristen Lammer from the International Institute of Tourism Studies. And it's great because we're also partnered with Kristen in looking at some of the important trails in the area and looking at from an ecological and an economic perspective. So, Kristen, take it away.
Thank you so much. Great. Thank you, and thank you, Laura, for the presentation. Thank you all for joining us today. This is an interesting discussion for those of us in the tourism sector to have, because we talk about tourism a lot, and for some reason outdoor recreation and trails tend to get isolated from the tourism discussion, which tends to be an economic discussion. But they are very, as we'll see and as we've heard, they are very much intertwined. I think, my name is Kristen Lammer. I am a professor at George Washington University. We're just down the street. And we are the oldest grantor of the Master of Tourism Administration graduate degree in the world. So actually, University of Surrey says that they are too, so we'll say North America, let them have Europe, but we've been around for a long time doing tourism development. Don't want to speak out of turn for our British colleagues. So we tend to focus on both international as well as tourists coming to the United States, but we are in a business school, and so we tend to look at the economics of tourism, but my background is sustainable tourism and sustainability, so we do actually look at all sides of the coin. I think I can start and finish this presentation by just saying tourism is huge. And I think if I just ended there, you'd get the picture. But let me give you some numbers so we can actually, so we can impress you that much more about how huge tourism is. Of particular interest, and I would think to this body of particular interest, is international visitation to the United States. We know, and I'm going to talk about President Obama's initiatives around travel and tourism. This administration has put forth several key pieces of legislation as well as decrees, if you will, around the travel and tourism sector. And it's represented some significant gains for us receiving tourists here in the United States. So, the numbers are quite small, but this in 2013 we're looking at 69.0. In 2014 we're looking at 71.8. Those numbers are in millions of international visitation to the United States. I think of more importance is that the numbers are going up, right? So rather than the individual numbers, we continue to increase our international visitation. This is important for a number of reasons, which we're going to talk about in a second. So what does that mean? From an economic perspective, tourists coming from other countries to the United States spent a lot of money here. And I'll remind you, and this is something I always like to tell my students, tourism is an export. It happens to be one of the few, if not only export, where the product is consumed at the point of production, but it's an export. And so we have a trade surplus in the United States. We have very few of those, but tourism is one of those, right? And so international visitors spent $15.3 billion on activities just in November 2013, which represents about an 8% increase from the same month in 2012. So again, spending as well as visitation is on the rise. And when we talk about spending, we're talking about not just visiting hotels and spending hotels, but you've got the multiplier that Greg referenced earlier. You've got food, lodging, local transportation, handicrafts, everything from doing your laundry to visiting a local market. And so this represents a very diverse spending base that we can talk about. So just to throw out some numbers, I'm going to talk about tourism and the economy. I'm going to talk about our market share here in the U.S. and I'm going to talk about tourism and trade. But let me talk about the economy first. So the 2012 numbers are the latest numbers we have, but travel and tourism represents about 2.8, almost 3% of the GDP here in the U.S. Generates 7.8 million jobs. So 7.8 million jobs just in people coming to the United States. Directly we have about 5.6 and another 2.2 million jobs generated with indirect jobs. And those are things like farmers producing food, laundry services, doing laundry for the hotels, etc. And then, interestingly, right now in 2012, we're calculating about 1.2 million jobs being created by international visitors to the United States. This is something that, as I said, the administration has put a priority on, and we're seeing those numbers increase. And I think you can look at these numbers up on the screen, and I have copies of the presentation because I know it's very number intense. But I think the most important number here is the 44% of total sales are related to outdoor recreation. So what does that mean? Almost half of what people are doing while they are participating in this huge economic engine has to do with outdoor recreation, and of course trails and visitation to parks are right up there. So trade, just to throw out some numbers, because I know particularly in this building we like to talk about things, we like to talk about numbers in trade. As I said, the tourism industry has had a trade surplus every year since '89. We have about a $47.5 billion surplus here in the United States. The top surplus countries are Canada, Japan, and Brazil. So that means people coming from those countries to visit the U.S. are spending more than the reciprocal relationship. And travel and tourism represents about 25% of the service exports. So a quarter of service exports are related to travel and tourism here in the U.S., people coming to the U.S. So here's the caveat. We actually are quite strong in the United States. When we look at international visitors arriving, we still dominate. We still get a huge portion of the market share. 11.9%, almost 12% of the world travel spending is here in the United States. We get about 6% of the global travelers. But if you look at the chart, we're losing we're losing, along with our fellow developed countries, market share. So emerging destinations like China, like Brazil, like Turkey, are taking a good portion of the market share as it pertains to tourism. So what does that mean? It means we have to be vigilant and continually competitive in the travel industry and in support for the travel industry. The thing is, no one can top what we have here in the United States. We have 21 World Heritage Sites. We have amazing national beauty, and we know people are coming for that. And so this is really the thing that makes us different. Everywhere in the world they have casinos now. Everywhere in the world they have resorts. You know, what you can't replicate is the Grand Canyon. You can't replicate a trail, an Appalachian Trail experience. You know, so these are the things. This is where we have a competitive advantage, and we need to focus on because we are in danger of losing this market share. The good news is we have a lot of tourists visiting the national parks, particularly international travelers coming to the national parks. The data I have, the last data is 2009. Hopefully we'll see some new data soon, but with the exception of a little bit of a dip in the 07, 08 area, and again in 03. 03 we feel had something to do with difficulty in traveling to the United States post September 11th, and then 07, 08 was economics. But the good news is, both in proportion and volume, people are continuing to come to the United States for the purpose of visiting national parks and obviously participating in trail activities. Canada is our largest base of visitors, followed very closely with Mexico and the UK. And both in the case of Canada and the UK, to a lesser degree Mexico, the tourists that are coming are seeking outdoor experiences and visitation to national parks and hiking and trails as a major portion of their activity. Within the top 10 destinations for Canadians, amongst things like Los Angeles, New York City, and Washington, D.C. are 4 national parks. And so this is an indicator of how strong and how valuable these parks are and these outdoor experiences for our international visitors. And I apologize, this is a bit cut off, but what that should say is the activities that people participate in. And what's interesting about this slide is that we looked at, and this was actually Department of Commerce looked at, what types of activities travelers are participating in, the general traveler that comes here from abroad, and then the traveler that's actually seeking national park experience, and also those seeking to visit American Indian communities. And as you can see, as far as shopping and spending, they're all pretty much on par. But then when you get into things like visiting historical places, I hope it's a good vote, visiting historical places, visiting small towns, visiting art galleries and cultural heritage sites, we actually see a much higher propensity for those visiting national parks and Native American communities in participating in these activities. Why is that interesting and important? Because these areas, these rural communities, these small towns, these historic sites may not necessarily be, as Laura indicated, in the southern part of Virginia, may not necessarily be huge economic powerhouses for other reasons. We tend to think of tourism quite often is an economic activity that can be done in places where there may not necessarily be other economic options. So that gets us to what our federal government is doing now, and why is this important for the federal government to spend a whole bunch of time thinking about. The Obama administration has actually put forward some significant actions related to U.S. travel and tourism. We saw President Obama a few years ago stand in Disneyland and make an announcement that the federal government was going to put a lot more emphasis in facilitating visitation to the United States, particularly facilitating visas from China and Brazil. The reason for that is that tourism, as I mentioned, has incredible opportunities for job creation. They estimate with the activities that have been put forward, we're looking at creating another 2 million to 3.9 million new jobs in the travel and tourism sector. And this is achieved through a couple of smaller initiatives and then 2 very large initiatives, one being the Travel Promotion Act, which was signed into law in 2009. What this did was it actually put the United States on level with those other countries that actually have budget, if you will, to market themselves. Now, I've always said Hollywood does a very good job of marketing us as a country. Now, I think if you see sometimes what comes out of Hollywood, that may not necessarily be what we want from a marketing perspective, but there's no one sitting around wondering what the United States is in the rest of the world. However, there are quite a few people not understanding that there's something in between LA, Miami, and New York, and from the international perspective. And so what the Travel Promotion Act and the subsequent creation of the Corporation for Travel Promotion, which is more commonly known as Brand USA, is doing is marketing us and these lesser known destinations and leveraging their power with that of states and local destinations as well as major attractions to really get the word out about the unique qualities that are available here in the United States, such as our national parks, both the known and lesser known national parks, and, as well as state and regional outdoor recreation opportunities. The other piece that's really interesting is something called the National Travel and Tourism Strategy. This was actually signed or put in place last year, and the strategy actually outlines for really the first time, a path to move forward with regard to tourism in the United States and attracting specifically international travelers, although it of course also talks about the need for facilitating domestic travel. So the goal of the strategy is to create, is to welcome 100 million international visitors, estimated about 250 billion annually by the end of 2021. And to do that, we have several key activities within the strategy, or key objectives. One is to promote the United States. I just talked a little bit about those opportunities through Brand USA. And this is, again, very important. I travel internationally quite a bit, and there is very little known about what makes the United States special, other than maybe some, kind of antiquated ideas about what Native Americans are and the Grand Canyon. We really aren't doing a great job yet of kind of getting the word out there to our international visitors of how special those lesser known places are. We do know, the studies show, that tourists coming to the United States tend to go to those large urban iconic destinations their first time, but their second visit to the United States, or if they have a longer first visit to the United States, will include parks, trail participation, at a much higher level. So in order to do that, they need to know about these things. And then another objective is to plan, of the strategy, is to plan for the American experience and allow people the opportunity to actually gather information and be able to have a better idea of what the United States has to offer. And then the piece that is so interesting is to actually provide a memorable American experience. What does that mean? High-quality customer service for visitors from every aspect. Why is this important for the federal government to be talking about? Because much of what visitors come to see is managed by federal employees. We think about our parks, our historic, iconic destinations, and not to mention the first people you see when you walk into the country, the immigration officers. All of those are federal employees, and all of these have a say in how you will remember the United States. And we know from a marketing perspective, if somebody has a good time, they tell 1 people. If somebody has a bad time, they tell 7 people. So it's really important that we get people having a good experience when they come to the U.S., particularly as we try to build back some negative international perceptions about the United States not being a welcoming destination. And then the last piece of the effort within the travel and tourism strategy is to actually conduct research and measure results. This is huge for us in the tourism industry. It represents a lot of collaboration amongst federal agencies, academic institutions, tourism destinations, nonprofit, our civil society, and trying to really kind of understand not just these big numbers that we're talking about, but things like the economic impacts to the Appalachian Trail and other destinations. So all of this is moving forward. This is a great time to actually be talking about travel and tourism in the United States, and it's a great time to be making the connection between travel and tourism in the United States and what tourists want to do and the wonderful opportunities we have in national parks, state parks, and trails. So with that, I will end it there, but I think you're welcome to any questions you have.
Absolutely. Thank you very much, Kristen. Open it up to any questions. What we've tried to do is give you a quick snapshot of the largest picture, which is this huge tourism economy and the directions in the future. The outdoor recreation economy itself, which is being generated both by international tourists and, of course, vast majority by Americans, and most of it actually local. And then looking at a particularly unique American resource, and from the trail perspective, and that's the Appalachian Trail. So the important thing, and then I'll stop, is we are working in the trail community with partners like Kristen and others to try to make a better business case for the importance of sustainable trails, protecting our public lands, and ensuring that today and tomorrow trails and public lands are relevant to America as well as to the world, as we discussed. So open it up for any questions or comments. We're mindful of everyone's time. So any questions or thoughts? Sure, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm Chris Sanderson. I'm with the Pacific Crest Trail Association as a volunteer. And your conversation about rural communities is, it gets me wondering. I've hiked the Appalachian, Pacific Crest and Continental Divide trails, and have gone through some very poor communities that could potentially be world-class destinations to go to, and then let's say Leadore, Idaho, or Sayad Valley, California, or just some areas that are very economically depressed but have just a wealth of trails in those areas. And I'm wondering if there's any grants that small communities like that can get to help promote tourism in their community. I want to address that.
Sure.
Well, yeah, so my 2 cents on that is that I don't think individual communities can go it alone. That I think that they need to have a regional vision that, I think as Greg's, first slide highlighted the quote from Will Rogers, is when, these regions or these communities have a plan for their green infrastructure, then they can start to think about how to make investments in, developing a sustainable tourism agenda. And one that plays off of the assets and the values of one community and then another community somewhere up the trail, and you get those, those regions talking to one another. And the example that I showed from Southwest Virginia is one of a few along the Appalachian Trail. It's happening in Maine, it's happening in Pennsylvania, where when you have these communities come together, they start leveraging one another and going after grants. They become more successful because they have a much bigger and in some ways better story to tell. So that's what I would recommend. Look at the regional approach and see how communities in an area can collaborate and develop a long-term vision for both protection and promotion.
If I can just augment a bit what Laura mentioned. You look at certain gateway communities and people that are coming in and out of a particular area to enjoy the natural or cultural, even historic resources that are in a particular area. Most visitors don't distinguish a particular agency one from another. So if they go to a national park, well, maybe with the exception of some of the iconic ones, or they go to a national forest, which is managed by a separate department, and they go to a wildlife refuge, or they go through a state park. Let's say they're hiking and they go through multiple. To just build on Laura's point, it's important to have coordination with the land management agencies and those communities so that there is a good continuum and coordination so that people know what those experiences could be. So, but it's spot on the regional
Yeah,
approach.
and I think to your question about funding, I think there are community development agencies at the state level and at the federal level that will offer planning grants. I know we have worked more on the education side with communities through the National Endowment of the Arts has a Gateway Community Program. There's great training through the Conservation Fund just to get your community leaders thinking about future directions and leveraging public lands.
There's also an interesting program called Trail Towns, which Legislature actually looks at building capacity for those towns.
It just, one other thing that comes to mind too is thinking about it's somewhat overuse of some of our public lands as well, you know, and seeing some of these smaller rural communities that don't kind of get their slice of the pie, so to say, you know, if we can promote those areas and helping alleviate overuse in other public areas.
Well, and I will say, and this is probably not the best thing to say, but one way in which some of these communities were highlighted was during the government shutdown. You know, we saw, particularly when the iconic parks were closed, we saw Native American, we saw Native American communities that have really interesting canyons that can compete with, Grand cannot compete, but are similar to the Grand Canyon, and you saw state parks and regional areas that were accessible with visitors that were here that couldn't access the national parks. So something like that really shines the light on these other opportunities. Not that we want that to ever happen again, but it does provide an opportunity to see what else is out there, and then hopefully light a match or a spark in those communities about the opportunities that may lie.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, I'm Pete Shetley from the American Discovery Trail. I'm a volunteer with them. And we're trying to get the Congress to pass a bill that would make it official. And my comment or question on your message is, I really like your message, but when I talk to lots of staffers here, their common answer frequently is, we don't hear from local businessmen at all. Local chambers of commerce, local tourism directors, etc. They just don't communicate your message to the folks on the Hill. And so I'm asking if you have suggestions, insights as to how to overcome that hurdle. Because they say, we want to hear from our local chamber of commerce that the trail going through their town is a real economic engine. And they don't hear that.
Yeah, well, I'll take it. Well, just one of the things that we recommend, and this is, some of this information here is quite new. I mean, it's only in the last couple of years that we've started to generate this, and across the trail and land management community, both from the public and the private sector, there's a very explicit recognition that we have our work cut out for us to make sure that the right voices are being heard, but you have to educate those voices first. And so part of this is just a kind of almost a grassroots effort to be sharing the importance and shedding light on chambers of commerce and others, and to the importance of recreation dollars.
Yeah, and if I can, I'll just add that, I know I've, in many a rural community that I've been in, recognized that there are folks that have, even the AT, which I think has a fairly well-known identity, there are lots of local folks that have no idea about the AT. They know it's out there somewhere, but they don't know how it's connected. And so a big part of our program initially is very much about awareness raising. And if you haven't, hit a critical mass of folks that know about your trail and understand and appreciate the value, it makes it really tough, I think, to bring the story here to your congressional representatives to, and get some traction. So I would start with awareness raising.
I just think it goes back to those economic, the numbers that we're seeing, the economic numbers are still fairly new, and to the degree that we can educate business owners about the importance of the trail on their own businesses, that gives them some fuel for their fire. But getting economic impact studies out there is critical. I don't think we spend enough time talking about it.
We have Ron and then.
I had a question for Kristen. Grand USA and the Obama administration's efforts to promote, sort of the image of this country as a place to travel to. To what extent are they? I know they talk about national parks, but to what extent do they promote the idea of great hiking and walking trails? I know, for example, for the AT, we have documented that 34 people from 34 different countries have hiked the entire Appalachian Trail, and that's a small amount of the use, so I'm not focusing on that. But is there more effort to promote the kind of experience that we have here with our trails?
Yeah, I think that Brand USA, I mean, it's relatively new. They've already had a leadership change in the last, since it's been in existence. But, to be quite honest, I feel that my opinion is they're open to partnerships and ideas. And so if the trail community were to go to them, they would be open to that discussion. I don't know that they're sitting in their office down the street thinking about BAT or other trails. They may be. But what I do know is that they are spending a tremendous amount of effort engaging the national parks, the Department of Interior folks, your national parks, your state parks, your American Indian communities into the international marketing efforts. And so, for example, International Powwow, which is a massive trade show, travel and tourism trade show here in the U.S. for international tour operators, for the first time this past year, all of the American agencies were represented together in one kind of united, I think they called it the U.S. Boulevard, or the Pavilion, the U.S. Pavilion. It was, you had the Bureau of Indian Affairs, you had Department of Interior, National Park Service, you had the state tourism offices, you had Vegas, you had all of these players in one place, having having unified talking points and having that discussion. And so I would encourage the hiking community to be relatively proactive about opening that discussion with Brand USA, but it's not something that they are actively not promoting. It's just a matter of there's so much here in the United States to offer that they're looking for partnership. Remember that their funding structure, and I should have mentioned this, their funding structure is very much a match structure. And the way that they're funded, when people visit the United States from visa waiver countries, they have to pay a small fee. $10 of that fee goes to fund Brand USA. It's our marketing budget. But the industry has to match that. It's $100 million. They have to match that. And so they are looking for partners to match that in every sense of the word, be it in-kind matching. Obviously, folks like Disney can do other types of matching. But they have been open, from everything I've seen, they've been open to every type of partnership that will allow. But I think you have to be a bit proactive about it.
Hi, my name is Ursula Reed, and I'm with the Washington Rochambeau Revolutionary Route. We're the new National Historic Trail on the block here, and it's a 700-mile trail that goes from Boston down to Yorktown. My experience in Philadelphia has been that a lot of people don't know about National Historic Trails. In terms of the National Scenic Trails, they might know about the Appalachian Trail, but unless they've traveled out west, they don't know. One of our biggest challenges is to, educate people about National Historic Trails and what it means, to the northeastern corridor, potentially in terms of the tourism. And the second question I have is, what is the industry doing to really proactively promote this information in light of what's going on all over the country with this fracking thing? Because that's going to ruin it all.
So
no simple answers.
Yeah, I don't know that I can address the fracking issue. The very creation, the Travel Promotion Act and the very creation of Brand USA was largely industry driven. The U.S. Travel Association and other industry associations took a very proactive role in convincing first the Bush administration that it unfortunately didn't get passed, and then the Obama administration where it did get passed, although both presidents were very much in favor of it, in convincing I guess those in this building that we needed this type of marketing arm.
So we need to finish up. We can have informal discussion, but there's
One last question.
tight constraints on time with these rooms. So go ahead.
You articulated what I try to convey to local groups frequently. Two questions. Can we get a copy of your PowerPoint, or do you want to put this dog and pony show on the road? Don't answer the second part, because I want you to think about that. There are places where you can go and look close by. and do the
Sure,
same thing
sure.
and have an impact, back up what we were saying to those same communities, you've got authority, you've got the numbers right there.
And this is the second time that we have done this type of briefing, and we're looking at ways to help carry a more compelling and meaningful and frankly relevant message so that people understand that, wow, this is hitting my pocketbook. That there is a future that's bright and is not a sacrifice in the natural and cultural or even historic landscape of our country, or
Greg,
heritage.
I'll be calling you.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And so certainly, we're happy to share all information. Of course, I know how to get hold of you, Jim, so will do. But with that, we have plenty of refreshments, so please don't go away without sharing. And Kristen and Laura, thanks so much. And just to say, before we began, the three of us were talking about ways that we could look into the future and use, for example, the Appalachian Trail across 14 states as a way to demonstrate with hard numbers, it's going to take some time, how the Appalachian Trail and those surrounding communities truly is an economic engine. And what is the business model that's around the regional and even national economy of an iconic trail like the Appalachian Trail. That would be a very powerful, I think we'd be very surprised, positively and pleasantly surprised by the numbers, but we don't have those today. So again, thank you for your interest, refreshments, there's other, we can still stay here, but we just need to finish it up. Thank you very much.